I don't need a baby, the cruel millionaire CEO told his best friends, Mom. I want you to be my wife. The intensity in his eyes made her pulse quicken despite herself. There was something he wasn't saying, something beneath the polished surface. Have you ever received an offer that seemed too good to be true? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She came to thank him for his generosity. He responded by asking her to become his wife. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a penthouse that screamed old money and new technology. Lorraine Davis stepped out tentatively, her modest black dress suddenly feeling inadequate against the backdrop of floor-to-ceiling windows framing Manhattan skyline. She clutched her purse tighter, reminding herself why she was here, to thank the man who had paid for her late husband's medical treatments. Nothing more. Mrs. Davis. Mason Cole's voice cut through the space before she saw him. He emerged from around a corner, tall and imposing in a charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than her car. Welcome to New York, Mr. Cole. She extended her hand, her southern accent softening the edges of his name. I appreciate you making time for me. His handshake was firm, businesslike, but his ice blue eyes lingered on her face a beat too long. Kenneth was a good man. The treatments should have worked. The mention of her husband's name made her throat tighten. That's why I'm here, to thank you properly for everything you did. The doctor said without those experimental treatments, he wouldn't have had those extra months. Mason gestured toward the living room. Drink, just water, please. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey, handed her a glass of water, and settled into a leather chair across from her. How's Atlanta treating you? It's home, she said simply. Different without Kenneth, but still home. And financially, the question caught her off guard. I beg your pardon? Kenneth's insurance. Did it cover everything? Lorraine shifted uncomfortably. We had some savings. I'm managing. Mason nodded, his expression unreadable. He took a sip of his drink, then set it down with purpose. I have a proposition for you, Lorraine. A proposition. I don't need a baby, he said abruptly, eyes locked on hers. I want you to be my wife. The water glass nearly slipped from her fingers. I'm sorry, what? A marriage. Between you and me. Lorraine stared at him, certain she'd misheard. Mason Cole was one of the wealthiest men in America, a tech genius who graced magazine covers and dated supermodels. And she was a 46-year-old widow from Georgia with graying roots she needed to touch up. That's not funny, Mr. Cole. I'm not joking. His gaze was unwavering. This would be a mutually beneficial arrangement. You'd want for nothing financially for the rest of your life. Why would you want to marry me? The question came out barely above a whisper. Something flickered across his face, a calculation, a decision. I need someone I can trust, someone with no connections to my world, someone who understands loss. Lorraine stood up, suddenly angry. I didn't come here for charity or pity. This isn't charity. He rose too, his height making her take a step back. This is business, with personal benefits for us both. The intensity in his eyes made her pulse quicken despite herself. There was something he wasn't saying, something beneath the polished surface. You're not making any sense. Think about it, he said, stepping closer. 1 year as my wife. After that, if you want out, you walk away with financial security for life. As the words left his lips, I don't need a baby. I want you to be my wife. Lorraine realized this wasn't gratitude he was after. The look in his eyes suggested something far more dangerous, revenge. Have you ever received an offer that seemed too good to be true? Would you consider a marriage of convenience if it could change your life forever? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Behind every calculated offer lies a truth too painful to speak aloud. Mason's proposal wasn't about love, but something much darker. Lorraine found herself at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. The lights below reminded her how far she was from home, from everything familiar. You're asking me to uproot my life based on what exactly? She turned to face Mason, who stood watching her with that unsettling patience. You haven't told me why you really want this arrangement. I've told you the financial benefits. No, she cut him off. There are plenty of women who would marry you for your money. You don't need me specifically for that. Weren't you telling me? The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. He walked to a sleek desk in the corner and returned with a folder. You deserve some answers, he conceded, opening the folder. These are the terms I'm proposing. $5 million in your name immediately upon marriage. Another 5 after 1 year, regardless of whether you choose to continue our arrangement. Lorraine's knees weakened at the numbers. She sank on a couch. This is absurd. It's practical, he countered. I need a wife who isn't after my money or connections. Someone with dignity, intelligence, and no hidden agenda. His voice lowered. Kenneth spoke of you often, with admiration. The mention of her husband sent a pang through her chest. You barely knew us. I knew Kenneth better than you think. Mason sat beside her, close enough that she caught the subtle scent of his cologne. We had business together beyond friendship. What kind of business? He hesitated, studying her face. Kenneth was helping me with a sensitive corporate matter before he got sick. I don't understand what that has to do with. She gestured between them. Mason's jaw tightened. Have you ever heard of Harrison Blake? The name sounds familiar. He's my chief competitor, and a man without ethics. Mason's fingers brushed against hers as he handed her a document from the folder. An unexpected current ran up her arm at the contact. Blake has been trying to take over my company for years. He nearly succeeded last quarter. Lorraine glanced at the document. Stock prices, acquisitions, corporate language she didn't fully understand. And this connects to me how? Mason leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. A marriage to someone unconnected to my world would stabilize certain elements of my holdings, make a hostile takeover more difficult. She shook her head. That still doesn't explain why me specifically. His eyes held hers for a long moment. Because Blake knew Kenneth, and I need someone Blake wouldn't suspect has access to certain information. Lorraine felt a chill. What aren't you telling me about my husband? Mason's knuckles whitened around his glass. When he mentioned the name, Harrison Blake, Lorraine noticed how Mason's knuckles whitened around his glass. Your husband's death wasn't an accident, he said, voice dropping to a whisper. And I need your help to prove it. Do you think Mason is telling Lorraine everything? Have you ever suspected someone had ulterior motives? How good are you at reading between the lines? Let me know in the comments. She signed a marriage contract with steady hands, never guessing that the fine print would entangle her heart along with her signature. 3 days later, Lorraine sat in Mason's home office, sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating the document before her. The prenuptial agreement was 40 pages of legal language that essentially said, this marriage is temporary, the money is real, and emotions are not part of the deal. My lawyer reviewed everything, she said, tapping a pen against the glass table. After Mason's bombshell about Kenneth's death, she'd returned to her hotel room and spent a sleepless night weighing her options. By morning, curiosity and a sense of purpose had won out over caution. He thinks I'm crazy, by the way. Mason looked up from his laptop. What did you tell him? That it's complicated. She met his gaze steadily. Which it is. Having second thoughts. A few hundred. She smiled without humor. But if what you're saying about Harrison Blake is true, if he had anything to do with Kenneth's death, then I want to know. Mason closed his laptop and gave her his full attention. Once we do this, there's no going back. Blake is dangerous, clever. We'll need to convince everyone this marriage is genuine. I understand what's at stake. She held his gaze. But I have conditions of my own. His eyebrow lifted. I'm listening. Complete honesty between us behind closed doors. No more half-truths or strategic omissions. Agreed. I maintain my independence. My identity. This arrangement doesn't make me your property. A hint of admiration flashed in his eyes. Of course. And I want to be involved in your strategy against Blake. Not just a figurehead, but a partner. Mason studied her with newfound interest. Kenneth always said you were the backbone of their household. I'm starting to see why. Lorraine felt a flush rise to her cheeks under his scrutiny. Last condition. After this is over, whichever way it goes, you tell me everything about Kenneth's work with you. Everything you've held back. That's fair. He nodded. Anything else? She hesitated, then added, public affection will be necessary to sell this. I understand that, but private boundaries remain unless. She trailed off, unsure how to finish the thought. Mason watched her intently, a hint of something unreadable in his expression. Unless boundaries change by mutual consent, he finished for her. The way he said it sent an unexpected warmth through her body. She looked down at the contract, gathering her composure. Then we have a deal. She signed her name with a flourish, then slid the document across to him. As she signed her name, Lorraine added one condition Mason hadn't anticipated. I'll be your wife in every way necessary to convince the world, but I need to know exactly what happened to Kenneth. All of it. His silence told her she'd hit a nerve. What would your non-negotiables be in an arrangement like this? What boundaries would you set? Share your thoughts on what you'd require in Lorraine's position. The ring on her finger cost more than her house in Atlanta, but it was the weight of the lie, not the diamonds, that felt heaviest. Lorraine stood in the walk-in closet of what was now her bedroom in Mason's penthouse, running her fingers over designer clothes that had appeared overnight. Tags from Chanel, Gucci, and other names she'd only seen in magazines hung from sleeves and necklines. A note on the dresser read simply, for appearances, M. The quiet efficiency with which Mason operated was both impressive and unnerving. In just 1 week, he'd arranged their civil ceremony at City Hall, witnessed only by his lawyer and assistant, moved her belongings from Atlanta, and created a paper trail of their relationship through backdated dinner reservations and event appearances photoshopped to include her. Her wedding ring caught the light as she reached for a black dress. The platinum band held diamonds that sparkled like tiny stars, elegant but substantial enough to announce her new status. Too much. Mason's voice came from the doorway. He'd loosened his tie after returning from the office, looking slightly less intimidating in his partial dishevelment. It's beautiful, she admitted. Just not me. It will be, he said, for a while. Their eyes met in the mirror's reflection. Something shifted in the air between them, a current of awareness that neither acknowledged. The charity gala is tomorrow night, he continued, breaking the moment. First public appearance. Blake will be there. Lorraine turned to face him. Will he suspect anything? That depends on how convincing we are. Mason stepped into the closet, closing the distance between them. We need to appear comfortable with each other. Intimate. The word hung between them. Lorraine was suddenly conscious of how close he stood, how the custom suit framed his athletic build. I was an actress in college, she said, keeping her voice light. I can play a role. Good. He reached past her for a tie on the rack behind, his arm brushing hers. Because Blake misses nothing. The casual contact shouldn't have affected her, but Lorraine found herself holding her breath. At 46, she was hardly an inexperienced woman, yet something about Mason made her feel off balance. You should wear the blue gown tomorrow, he said, stepping back. It matches your eyes. My eyes are brown, she corrected with a hint of amusement. His gaze flicked to hers, then away. So they are. The blue will complement your skin tone, then. The awkwardness of their new living arrangement hung in the air. Two strangers playing at marriage, navigating the intimate dance of shared space. Mason, she called as he turned to leave. What was Kenneth helping you with exactly? Before he got sick, his expression closed off. One step at a time, Lorraine. Let's get through tomorrow night first. The charity gala would be their first public test. But as Mason's hand settled possessively on her lower back, Lorraine realized the real test would be ignoring how her body responded to his touch. Have you ever stepped into a world completely different from your own? How did you stay true to yourself? Has anyone else felt that unexpected attraction to someone who was completely wrong for them? I want to hear your stories. 500 pairs of eyes watched their every move. But it was his gaze alone that made her skin flush beneath the designer gown. The Metropolitan Museum's grand hall hummed with wealth and influence. Champagne flowed, diamonds glittered, and conversations about million-dollar donations were exchanged as casually as weather observations. Lorraine took a steadying breath, feeling the weight of Mason's hand at the small of her back. Nervous? He murmured. his lips close to her ear. Terrified, she admitted quietly. Everyone's staring. Of course they are. His voice held a note of pride that seemed genuine. You're stunning. The blue gown hugged her curves before flowing gracefully to the floor. The stylist Mason had hired had transformed her practical bob into soft waves and applied makeup that enhanced rather than masked her features. For the first time in years, Lorraine felt beautiful and completely out of place. Mason Cole with a wife. A sharp-featured woman approached, air-kissing Mason's cheek. The city's most committed bachelor finally caught. No one believed the announcement. Believe it, Victoria. Mason's arm slid around Lorraine's waist, pulling her closer. Lorraine, this is Victoria Chambers, editor of Style Monthly. Lovely to meet you, Lorraine said, channeling her mother's southern hospitality. Your magazine's coverage of sustainable fashion last month was fascinating. Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. You read Style Monthly? Every issue. Though I admit, I never expected to wear anything featured in its pages. The editor laughed, warming instantly. Refreshing honesty. Mason, she's delightful. Where have you been hiding her? Atlanta, he replied smoothly. Some treasures are worth the distance. As Victoria moved on, Lorraine gave Mason an appreciative glance. Not bad, Mr. Cole. You're the one charming the Dragon Lady of Manhattan media. His eyes crinkled with genuine amusement. Keep this up, and they'll all be eating from your hand by midnight. The night progressed with introductions and small talk. To her surprise, Lorraine found herself enjoying the role of Mrs. Cole. Years of community organizing in Atlanta had taught her how to navigate different personalities, and these wealthy New Yorkers weren't so different from the church committee members she'd managed, just with better shoes and bigger egos. He's here, Mason whispered during a lull in conversation, his body tense beside her. Following his gaze, she spotted a silver-haired man holding court across the room. Though in his 60s, Harrison Blake radiated vigor and command. His laugh carried across the space as he charmed a circle of admirers. Ready? Mason asked, eyes dark with purpose. As I'll ever be. They moved through the crowd toward Blake. When the older man spotted them, his smile sharpened. Mason Cole. Blake's voice boomed with false joviality. And this must be the new Mrs. Cole I've heard about. Harrison. Mason's greeting was cool, but polite. Yes, my wife, Lorraine. Blake took her offered hand, but instead of shaking it, he raised it to his lips. A pleasure that was worth the wait, clearly. Something predatory in his gaze made Lorraine's skin crawl. The pleasure is mine, Mr. Blake. I've heard so much about you. All terrible, I hope, he laughed. It's the only way to maintain an interesting reputation. Mason's arm tightened around her waist. Blake noticed, his eyes glinting with interest at the protective gesture. How's Kenneth's family? Blake asked suddenly. You were close with him, weren't you, Mason? The deliberate mention of her late husband sent a shock through Lorraine. Mason's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. Very. In fact, that's how Lorraine and I met. Without warning, Mason turned to her, his expression softening. Darling, would you mind if I had a word with Harrison about that investment we discussed? Understanding this was part of their strategy, Lorraine nodded. Of course, honey. Then Mason did something neither of them had planned. He leaned down and kissed her. His lips claimed hers with practiced ease, but the hand at her waist trembled slightly, a crack in his perfect control that thrilled her more than the kiss itself. What began as performance deepened into something neither expected, the taste of champagne and desire mingling between them. When they broke apart, Lorraine struggled to catch her breath. The room around them continued its glittering dance, oblivious to how the ground had just shifted beneath her feet. Harrison Blake's smile as he approached them sent a chill down Lorraine's spine. Mrs. Cole, he said, taking her hand, your husband and I have unfinished business. The way Mason's arm tightened around her waist told her everything. This was the man responsible for Kenneth's death. When have you put on a performance that began to feel real? Share a time when pretending crossed into truth. Has a kiss ever caught you completely off guard? Let me know in the comments. Behind every billion-dollar empire lies a trail of broken promises and bodies. Lorraine never expected her husband to be one of them. "You need to tell me everything. Now." Lorraine's voice cut through the silence of the car as they headed back to the penthouse. The charity gala's glamour had faded, replaced by the weight of Blake's calculated words. Mason loosened his bow tie, eyes fixed on the passing city lights. "Not here. Walls have ears, especially in hired cars." The ride continued in tense silence until they reached the safety of Mason's private elevator. As soon as the doors closed, Lorraine turned to him. "That man knows something about Kenneth's death. I could see it in his eyes." "Yes." The single word carried a heaviness that made her heart sink. Inside the penthouse, Mason went straight to his office. Lorraine followed, kicking off her heels. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing her one before settling behind his desk. "Kenneth wasn't just my friend," he began, bringing up files on his computer. "5 years ago, he developed a security system for my company's data centers. Revolutionary stuff. It's what attracted Blake's attention." Lorraine frowned. Kenneth was a general contractor. He built houses, not security systems. That was his day job. Mason turned the screen toward her. "Your husband had a gift for physical security design. He could look at a building and instantly see its weaknesses." On screen was a complex blueprint with Kenneth's name in the corner. Lorraine felt dizzy. "He never told me. He was protecting you. The work was confidential and sometimes dangerous." "So Blake wanted this technology?" Mason's expression darkened. "Blake doesn't innovate. He steals. We couldn't buy Kenneth's loyalty. He tried threats." Lorraine's hands began to shake. "Are you saying?" 3 months before Kenneth's diagnosis, Blake's company suffered a major security breach. Millions lost. Kenneth's system would have prevented it. "That doesn't explain." Blake reached out to Kenneth afterward, offering triple what I paid him to jump ship. Mason downed his whiskey. Kenneth refused. The office suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. Lorraine stood, moving to the window. Manhattan glittered below, oblivious to her crumbling world. 2 weeks later, Kenneth started feeling sick. Mason continued quietly. At first, just fatigue, then the other symptoms. "Cancer," Lorraine whispered. "Stage 4 by the time they found it. Aggressive, unusual for his age and health history." The implication hung in the air between them. Lorraine turned slowly. "That's impossible. You can't give someone cancer, even if you have access to certain compounds. Radioactive materials in small, targeted doses. Nearly impossible to trace." Horror washed over her. "You think Blake poisoned my husband because he wouldn't sell out?" Mason's silence was answer enough. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Why wait until now?" Her voice rose with each question. "I needed proof. Still do." He approached her slowly. Kenneth suspected something wasn't right. The night before he was scheduled for more tests, he sent me files, evidence he'd been gathering about Blake's operations. Why didn't he go to the police? Without concrete proof? Against one of the most powerful men in tech. Mason shook his head. Blake would have buried it. And Kenneth. Lorraine's mind raced through memories of Kenneth's final months. His insistence on updating his will, his cryptic comments about making things right. Kenneth discovered Blake was stealing proprietary technology. Mason confessed, voice breaking. The night before he was going to expose him, he suddenly got sicker. Lorraine's blood turned to ice as realization dawned. Are you saying Harrison Blake murdered my husband? How would you react discovering someone you trusted had hidden crucial information? Would anger or understanding win out? Tell me what you do in Lorraine's position. Some truths cut deeper than knives. The revelation that her husband died for someone else's greed left blood on more hands than she'd imagined. Rain lashed against the penthouse windows as Lorraine paced the living room. 3 hours had passed since Mason's revelation, and her world had tilted on its axis. Every memory of Kenneth's illness now carried a darker shadow. Show me the evidence, she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. Mason hesitated. It's circumstantial. If I had concrete proof, Blake would already be behind bars. I want to see it anyway. He nodded, disappearing into his office. When he returned, he carried a secure laptop. Kenneth created an encrypted file. He called it insurance policy. The laptop opened to a series of documents, emails, and photos. Lorraine leaned forward, absorbing details of meetings, transactions, and surveillance photos of Blake with known corporate spies. This shows Blake's pattern of industrial espionage, Mason explained, but not his direct connection to Kenneth's illness. Then what convinced you it wasn't natural causes? Mason pulled up a medical report. I had samples of Kenneth's tissue analyzed by a specialist after he died. Traces of polonium-210. Low dose, hard to detect unless you're looking for it. Polonium? The word felt foreign on her tongue. Radioactive. Causes symptoms that mimic certain cancers. By the time doctors identify what's happening, it's too late. Thunder cracked outside, matching the storm in Lorraine's chest. You've known this for a year and did nothing? I've been building a case, Mason countered. Blake is untouchable without ironclad evidence. So where do I fit in? Her voice hardened. What's my role in your revenge plan? Mason met her gaze directly. Access. As my wife, you'll be invited places Blake's guard will be down. People talk differently around a grieving widow than a business rival. You're using me as bait. It wasn't a question. I'm giving you a chance at justice, he corrected. And protection. If Blake suspects you know anything, you'd be vulnerable alone in Atlanta. Lorraine turned away, emotions warring within her. Grief for Kenneth, rage at Blake, and something complicated toward Mason, the man who'd kept secrets but also sought justice. I always wondered why you paid for those treatments, she said quietly. It wasn't just friendship, was it? It was guilt. Mason's silence confirmed her suspicion. You knew Kenneth was working on something dangerous for you, she continued, pieces falling into place. You feel responsible. I'm responsible, he finally admitted, voice raw. I brought him into my world. I should have protected him better. The confession broke something open between them. Lorraine saw, for the first time, the weight Mason carried. Not just calculated revenge, but genuine remorse. Kenneth made his own choices, she said softly. He believed in your work. That doesn't absolve me. Rain streamed down the windows like tears neither of them would shed. In the reflection, Lorraine caught Mason watching her with an expression that went beyond strategic alliance. So what now? She asked. We continue as planned. Build our credibility as a couple. Get closer to Blake. And then we find proof that links him directly to Kenneth's death. Enough to destroy him legally and publicly. Lorraine nodded slowly, a new resolve hardening within her. This wasn't just Mason's vendetta anymore. It was hers too. I'm in, she said. Not for your redemption, but for Kenneth's justice. She hadn't realized she was crying until Mason crossed the room and tentatively wiped a tear from her cheek. The gesture, unexpected in its gentleness, broke the last of her composure. Her tears soaked his shirt as he held her, his heartbeat steady under her cheek. I should have protected him, Mason whispered into her hair. That's why I need to protect you now. What he didn't say was that somewhere between strategy and revenge, Lorraine had become more than a pawn in his game. Have you ever found strength in your darkest moment? When has anger transformed into purpose for you? Share a time when truth changed everything you thought you knew. She married him for security. He married her for revenge. Neither expected desire to complicate their perfectly crafted plan. 2 weeks into their arrangement, something was changing. Lorraine noticed it in small moments. Mason lingering over breakfast, asking about her day, his eyes following her movements when he thought she wasn't looking. Their public appearances had become more natural. The society columns buzzed about the unlikely love story between the tech titan and the Southern widow. Even Mason's executive team had warmed to her presence at company functions. The board wants you at the charity committee meeting tomorrow. Mason mentioned one evening as they shared takeout in the kitchen, another new habit. Gone were the formal dinners of their first days together. Lorraine raised an eyebrow. Why would the board want me there? Your background in community organizing impressed them. They think you could help direct our charitable foundation more effectively. Pride flickered unexpectedly. I'd like that, actually. Mason studied her over his wine glass. You surprised them. Me too. How so? You fit into this world like you were born to it, without losing yourself. He gestured vaguely. Most people either reject it completely or get consumed by it. The compliment warmed her more than it should have. Years of church fundraisers teach you to handle difficult personalities. Rich or poor, people are just people. Mason smiled. A real smile that transformed his usually guarded features. That's exactly what makes you dangerous to someone like Blake. He can't figure you out. Their eyes held for a moment too long before Lorraine broke the connection, standing to clear their plates. These moments of genuine connection were becoming frequent, blurring the lines of their business arrangement. The next day, Lorraine walked into Cole Enterprises for the committee meeting, dressed in a navy suit that balanced professionalism with approachability. The boardroom fell silent as she entered, 12 pairs of eyes assessing her. By meeting's end, she had redirected the foundation's focus toward medical access for underserved communities and secured twice the planned funding. When Mason arrived to escort her to lunch, the board chair was already implementing her suggestions. "You've conquered my board in one meeting," Mason murmured as they entered his private elevator. They just needed a fresh perspective. She felt exhilarated by the victory, by using this new position for meaningful change. The elevator doors closed, leaving them in private for the first time that day. The air between them shifted, charged with something beyond professional satisfaction. "You were magnificent in there," Mason said, his voice lower than usual. "Kenneth always said you were the backbone of their household." He was right. The mention of Kenneth no longer brought just pain. Now it carried a sense of purpose, honoring his memory by bringing his killer to justice. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity," she said. "It feels good to make a difference." "You're not just making a difference at the foundation." Mason stepped closer. "You're changing everything." The elevator stopped, but neither moved to exit. Lorraine was acutely aware of how close they stood, how his cologne mixed with the subtle scent of his skin. The professional boundaries they'd maintained were wavering. Weeks of shared meals, strategy sessions, and public touches had created an intimacy neither had anticipated. She approached him with the same grace that had charmed his board members hours earlier, but the look in her eyes was anything but business. "Tonight," she whispered, fingers tracing his jaw, "I don't want to pretend." His restraint, maintained for weeks, shattered under her touch. Hours later, in the privacy of the penthouse, Lorraine made a decision. This marriage might have begun as strategy, but her body recognized a truth her mind was still processing. The attraction between them had grown too powerful to ignore. When Mason returned from his evening meeting, she was waiting. No pretense of coincidental timing, no business matters to discuss. Just a woman who knew what she wanted. "Lorraine." He looked surprised to find her in his study. "I've been thinking," she said, her heart racing, "about boundaries, about what's real and what's pretend." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He stayed where he was, giving her control of what happened next. She crossed the room with deliberate steps. "I don't want to pretend tonight." His response was immediate and electric. The kiss they shared held none of the restraint of their public performances. This was raw, honest hunger that had been building since that first night at the gala. Afterward, tangled in sheets that held their shared secrets, Mason's phone lit up with an alert. Blake had made his move, and suddenly their delicate new connection wasn't just complicated, it was dangerous. When has something that began as practical evolved into passion? Have you ever crossed a line you promised yourself you wouldn't? Share your experience in the comments. In the game of corporate chess, the queen often makes the most devastating move, especially when her opponent doesn't see her coming. Blake's making a play for our European division. Mason's voice was tight as he scanned the alert on his phone. The intimate atmosphere evaporated, replaced by urgent strategy. Lorraine sat up, pulling the sheet around her. "How bad?" "He's arranged a meeting with our largest investor in London tomorrow. If he convinces Klaus to pull funding, we lose our foothold in the European market." She watched as Mason transformed back into the calculating CEO, already typing rapid-fire messages to his team. Yet something had fundamentally changed between them. The vulnerability they just shared couldn't be undone. "I need to fly to London tonight," he said, already reaching for clothes. "I'm coming with you." He paused. "This will be high-level corporate warfare. not a social event. Exactly why you need me there. Lorraine met his gaze evenly. Blake expects you to come alone, all business. He won't anticipate your wife joining you, especially one who now understands your company's charitable initiatives inside and out. Mason considered this. What are you thinking? Klaus's wife runs 3 major philanthropic organizations in Europe. What if I arranged a separate meeting with her while you're negotiating with him? A partnership between her charities and our foundation. A slow smile spread across Mason's face, creating an additional reason for them to maintain ties with Cole Enterprises. Exactly. Lorraine slid from the bed, newly energized. Blake won't see it coming because he still thinks I'm just window dressing. 4 hours later, they were on Mason's private jet bound for London. While he prepared financial projections, Lorraine researched Elise Klaus's charitable work, crafting a proposal that would genuinely benefit both organizations. You're a natural at this, Mason observed, watching her work across the cabin. She looked up, smiling. Years of stretching limited resources at community centers taught me to find win-win solutions. The flight attendant discreetly disappeared to the front cabin, leaving them truly alone. The atmosphere shifted again, the attraction between them reigniting despite the business at hand. Mason moved to sit beside her. About what happened earlier. I don't regret it, she said simply. Do you? His answer was to kiss her, softer than before, but with no less intensity. This complicates things. Life is complicated. Her fingers traced his jawline. At least this is a complication I chose. In London, they separated for their respective meetings. Mason to financial battle, Lorraine to philanthropic diplomacy. When they reconvened at their hotel suite that evening, both carried news of success. Klaus is keeping his investment, Mason announced, loosening his tie with satisfaction. Actually, he's increasing it by 15%. And Elise has agreed to co-chair a transatlantic health initiative with me, Lorraine added. She's introducing us to 2 other major European donors next month. Mason pulled her into a celebratory embrace that quickly deepened into something more. Their coming together held a new flavor, not just desire, but partnership. Victory shared tasted sweeter. Later, as London's lights glimmered outside their window, Mason received an email that made him sit up sharply. Blake's stock just dropped 12 points on the early Tokyo exchange. Lorraine propped herself on an elbow. Because of Klaus's decision? Partly, but there's more. Mason turned the laptop toward her. Someone leaked information about Blake Industries' failed security protocols to 3 major tech blogs. Is it true? Absolutely. But the timing. His eyes narrowed. This wasn't me. Then who? I don't know. But whoever it is has access to highly sensitive information. Mason looked troubled. We may have an unexpected ally or another enemy. The next morning, a courier delivered an envelope to their hotel. Inside was a photograph of Kenneth she'd never seen before, taken just days before his death. The handwritten note simply read, "Ask Mason what really happened that night. When has someone surprised you with abilities they didn't know you possessed? When have you stepped into your power unexpectedly? Tell me about a time you proved someone wrong who underestimated you." The most painful betrayals come wrapped in half-truths, and Mason had been serving them to her with a silver spoon. "What night?" Lorraine demanded, thrusting the photograph at Mason across the hotel suite. Kenneth's face stared up at them, gaunt but smiling weakly from hospital bed. A date stamp in the corner showed it was taken 3 days before his death. Mason went pale. "Where did you get this?" "It was delivered this morning." "Answer the question, Mason. What night is this note referring to?" He took the photo, studying it with clenched jaw. "We need to leave. Now." The courier who delivered this. "No more deflections." Her voice rose sharply. "You promised complete honesty. What are you telling me about Kenneth's death?" The tension crackled between them. Just hours ago, they'd been celebrating victory in each other's arms. Now, suspicion stretched the air thin. "Pack your things," Mason insisted. "This photo means someone's watching us. We'll talk on the plane where it's secure." Fuming but aware of the potential danger, Lorraine complied. The ride to the airport passed in icy silence. their newfound intimacy buried under mounting questions. Only when they were airborne, after Mason had the jet swept for listening devices, did he finally speak. I was there the night Kenneth died. The words hit Lorraine like physical blows. You told me you were in Tokyo. I was earlier that week. I flew back when the hospital called. Why lie about it? Her voice trembled with barely contained rage. Why hide that from me? Mason looked out the window, his profile harsh against the clouds. Because I didn't want you to know what Kenneth asked of me that night, which was to protect you, to make sure Blake never knew how much Kenneth had discovered. He turned to face her, and to use that information to destroy Blake, not just legally but completely. That doesn't explain the secrecy. Why not tell me this from the beginning? Because Kenneth made me promise something else. Mason's voice dropped. He made me swear I'd keep you out of it, that I'd never involve you in the fight against Blake. The betrayal cut deeper with each word. So this marriage wasn't about protecting me or justice for Kenneth. It was about breaking your promise to him. No. Mason moved to kneel before her seat. It began that way, yes. I needed your connection to access certain circles. But everything changed. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't you dare say this became real for you. Not while I'm D. I have never lied about Blake's involvement in Kenneth's death. No, you just lied about everything else. Lorraine stood, needing distance. You used my grief, my desire for answers, to pull me into exactly what Kenneth wanted to protect me from. Mason didn't deny it. I was there that night, he said quietly. I watched my friend die knowing who was responsible. And yes, I made a choice to break my promise to him because taking Blake down matters more than anything. More than my safety, my trust. I would never let anything happen to you. That's not your choice to make. A crystal glass shattered against the wall, the sound sharp in the confined space of the jet. Lorraine hadn't even realized she'd thrown it. Mason didn't flinch. There's more, he admitted. Kenneth didn't just stumble onto Blake's corporate espionage. He was helping me investigate Blake. I recruited him. The floors seemed to drop beneath her feet. You put him in Blake's path. I didn't know how dangerous Blake was then. None of US did. I was there with him. She whispered, tears finally breaking free. Every doctor's appointment, every treatment, every night, he couldn't sleep from the pain, while you were planning your revenge from a safe distance. Mason reached for her, but she backed away. Don't touch me. Lorraine, I need to know right now. Did you care about him at all? Or was Kenneth just another asset in your corporate war? He was my friend. Real pain flashed across Mason's face. I cared about him. I care about you too. That wasn't part of the plan, but it happened. I don't believe you. The words fell between them like stones. This whole relationship is built on calculation and lies. Not everything. He moved toward her again, determination in his eyes. What happened between us in New York, in London, that wasn't strategy. Before she could respond, he pulled her against him, his mouth finding hers in a kiss born of desperation and need. For one traitorous moment, her body responded, the chemistry between them undeniable despite her anger. Then she tore away, breathing hard. I'm done being manipulated by you. I'm not manipulating you, he insisted. I'm asking you to understand an impossible choice. I was there the night he collapsed. Mason finally admitted, voice hollow. I knew about Blake's threats weeks before and did nothing. He reached for her, but Lorraine stepped back, wedding ring catching alight. Then our marriage isn't the only thing built on lies. One has anger revealed deeper feelings. Is passion more honest in conflict or harmony? Have you ever felt betrayed by someone you were beginning to trust? Share your thoughts below. She fled to familiar ground, seeking clarity, never expecting that distance would only make the heart grow more conflicted. The Georgia humidity wrapped around Lorraine like a heavy blanket as she stepped onto her front porch. 3 days had passed since she'd walked out of Mason's penthouse, taking nothing but what she'd brought originally. Her modest Atlanta home stood unchanged, a time capsule from before her life had been upended. Inside, dust covers still draped the furniture. She pulled them off one by one, each movement a deliberate reclaiming of her former life. The wedding ring remained in her purse, not yet discarded, but no longer on her finger. Her neighbor Martha brought over casserole and curiosity, which Lorraine deflected with vague explanations about needing space. The local news hadn't yet caught on to the fact that Manhattan's most talked-about couple had separated. She had days, maybe a week, before that privacy evaporated. Mason had called 17 times. She hadn't answered once. His text messages evolved from demanding to pleading to simply, "Please be safe. I understand why you left." The last one came with a notification that he'd transferred $5 million to her personal account, the amount promised in their prenup. She hadn't touched it. On her third night home, Lorraine sat on her back porch swing, sweet tea in hand, watching fireflies blink in the gathering dusk. The simple pleasure felt foreign after weeks of Manhattan's constant motion. Her phone rang. Mason again. This time, something made her answer. "You can't buy forgiveness," she said instead of hello. His exhale was audible. "I know. The money was already yours. Part of our agreement. Our agreement was based on lies. Not all of it." His voice sounded different, stripped of its usual confidence. "How are you?" The genuine concern in his tone irritated her. It was easier to hate him completely than to acknowledge the complex truth that somewhere between fake marriage and real intimacy, she'd started to care for him. "I'm home," she said simply. "Figuring things out. Blake's been asking about you at events, wondering why you're not at my side." A chill ran through her despite the warm evening. "That's not my problem anymore." "Lorraine." Mason paused. "Kenneth wanted to protect you because he knew what Blake was capable of. I should have respected that." "Yes, you should have." She watched a firefly land on the porch railing, its gentle light pulsing. "But Kenneth shouldn't have kept secrets from me either. 23 years of marriage, and I didn't know who he really was. He was exactly who you thought, a good man who wanted to make a difference. By secretly working for you, putting himself in danger. The security systems he designed saved lives. He was proud of that work." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. "What do you want, Mason?" she finally asked. "To make this right?" His voice lowered. "I miss you." The simple admission caught her off guard. Before she could respond, a call-waiting beep interrupted. "I need to take this," she said, recognizing her lawyer's number. "Lorraine," Mason began. "Goodbye, Mason." She switched calls, but her lawyer's news about the foundation paperwork couldn't distract her from the confusing ache in her chest. Distance hadn't provided clarity. It had only emphasized how entangled her life had become with Mason's. That night, she dreamed of Kenneth, not sick and dying, but healthy and laughing. In the dream, he looked at her knowingly and said, "You always did have to learn things the hard way, Rainey." She woke to a text from an unknown number. "Meeting tomorrow, 8 p.m., about your husbands." Both of them. The knock on her door came past midnight. Standing on her porch was not Mason as she'd half expected, but Harrison Blake himself. "Mrs. Cole," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about your husbands, both of them. Does distance provide clarity or confusion when feelings are involved? When have you needed space to recognize what truly matters? Have you ever received unexpected insight from your dreams? Share your experiences below. When the devil makes an offer, the true cost is never in the contract. It's in the soul he demands as collateral." Lorraine's hand tightened on the door frame. Harrison Blake stood on her porch, rain dripping from his expensive overcoat, looking utterly out of place in her middle-class neighborhood. "How did you find me?" Her voice remained steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "Please." His smile was cold. "I located Kenneth years ago. Finding you was child's play." A flash of lightning illuminated his face, casting harsh shadows. Making a split-second decision, Lorraine stepped back. "Come in, Mr. Blake. Let's have that honest conversation." Inside, she deliberately led him to the kitchen rather than the living room. A space with potential weapons if needed. She didn't offer him a drink. "You're wondering why I'm here," Blake said, settling into a chair like he owned it. "I assume it's not a social call." He laughed, a sound without warmth. "Sharp. I see why Mason chose you, beyond the obvious benefits." His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "What do you want?" "To make you an offer." Blake placed a slim folder on the table. One better than whatever arrangement you have with Mason. Lorraine didn't touch it. I'm not for sale. Everyone has a price, Mrs. Cole. Even Kenneth did, eventually. The casual mention of her late husband sent rage coursing through her. Kenneth never betrayed Mason, didn't he? Blake's eyebrow raised. Ask yourself why Mason was really at the hospital the night Kenneth died. What they discussed that he's never told you. The doubt that had plagued her since London flared again. You didn't come here to talk about the past. No, I came to talk about the future. Blake tapped the folder. Inside is evidence that Mason Cole knew about the threat to Kenneth's life weeks before he got sick. Evidence that he chose to pursue his vendetta against me rather than warn his supposed friend. Lorraine fought to keep her expression neutral, but her heart hammered against her ribs. And what do you want in exchange for this supposed evidence? Information. Blake leaned forward. About Mason's new security protocol. The one Kenneth started and Mason finished after his death. Why would I have access to that? Because Mason trusts you. Blake's smile returned. At least he did. Before you ran back to Atlanta. How much did he know about their relationship? Lorraine wondered. Was he bluffing, or had he been watching them all along? I'm a grieving widow who married on the rebound, she said, testing him. You overestimate my importance. Doi. Thunder rolled outside, punctuating his words. Mason doesn't bring business associates to board meetings. He doesn't give anyone access to his private quarters. And he certainly doesn't chase after women who leave him. So he did know about their separation. Lorraine's mind raced. If she showed interest in his offer, she might learn more about his involvement in Kenneth's death. What exactly are you proposing? She asked carefully. Simple. You return to New York. Reconcile with your husband. Access his private server using the passwords in this folder. Copy the security protocol files. Deliver them to me. He spread his hands. In return, you get the truth about Kenneth's death and $10 million. And if I refuse? Blake's expression hardened. Mason has powerful enemies beyond me. Enemies who would find it useful to know his weaknesses. Like his obvious feelings for you. The threat hung in the air between them. You have 48 hours to decide. Blake stood, adjusting his cuffs. The passwords will prove I'm serious. Try them on any of Mason's personal devices. At the door, he turned back. Oh, and Mrs. Cole, don't bother calling Mason about this visit. My associates are monitoring his communications. I'll know immediately. After he left, Lorraine leaned against the closed door, heart racing. The folder sat on her kitchen table like a bomb waiting to detonate. Inside were photos, surveillance shots of her and Mason, dated weeks before their marriage. Notes about Kenneth's hospital visits, and a handwritten password that made her blood freeze. Rainy Day 0723. Her nickname and birthday, something only Kenneth had ever called her. How had Blake obtained it? The implications were horrifying. She reached for her phone, then hesitated, Blake's warning echoing in her mind. Instead, she grabbed her car keys and a raincoat. She needed to think somewhere safe, somewhere without electronic devices that could be monitored. As the storm intensified, Lorraine drove through sheets of rain, Blake's parting words echoing as she dialed Mason's number with shaking fingers. You have 48 hours to decide. Your new husband's empire or justice for your first husband's death. You can't have both. The call went straight to voicemail. How far would you go to protect someone who had hurt you? When does forgiveness become strength rather than weakness? Would you trust someone who had lied to you if lives were at stake? Drop your thoughts below. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unlikely corners, and sometimes those we've written off as enemies become our most powerful friends. The Atlanta History Center was nearly empty on a Tuesday morning. Lorraine chose it deliberately. A public place with poor cell reception where she could think without fear of electronic eavesdropping. Blake's visit had left her shaken, caught between impossible choices. She sat in the Civil War exhibit, surrounded by artifacts of another kind of conflict, when a familiar voice spoke behind her. Your security needs work, Mrs. Cole. Lorraine spun to find Vanessa Moore, Mason's head of security, standing casually beside a display case. How did you find me? GPS tracker in your wedding ring. Vanessa's expression remained neutral. Standard protocol for high-value coal associates. I left the ring at home. In your purse, actually, which you brought with you. Vanessa sat beside her. Blake visited you last night. It wasn't a question. Lorraine studied the woman's face, looking for signs of whose side she was really on. Mason sent you to spy on me. Mason doesn't know I'm here. Vanessa glanced around the empty gallery, which gives us approximately 20 minutes before his resources figure it out. Why should I trust you? Because I worked with Kenneth before Mason. Because I know what Blake did to him. And because right now, I'm your only option. Lorraine weighed her words carefully. Blake offered me a deal. Of course he did. Access to Mason's servers in exchange for supposed evidence and money. He knew things. Personal things about Kenneth and me that no one else could know. Vanessa nodded grimly. Blake's been collecting leverage on everyone in Mason's circle for years, including me. What does he have on you? Enough. Vanessa's jaw tightened. What matters is stopping him before he destroys more lives. How? Lorraine asked. I can't go back to Mason after everything he kept from me, but I can't give Blake what he wants either. You need to understand something about Mason first. Vanessa pulled out a small tablet, untraceable and secure. The night Kenneth died, this conversation was recorded. On screen, a hospital room appeared. Kenneth, gaunt and pale in his bed. Mason sitting beside him. The timestamp showed 11:42 p.m., hours before Kenneth's death. Promise me, Kenneth's weak voice rasped. Promise you'll take care of Rainey. I will, Mason answered, his voice thick with emotion. She can never know about Blake, about what we found. He'll come after her. I know. Kenneth gripped Mason's sleeve with surprising strength. Promise me you'll keep her out of this, even if it means letting Blake go. The anguish on Mason's face was raw, unguarded. I promise. Vanessa stopped the video. He meant to keep that promise. For almost a year, he focused solely on building a legal case against Blake, keeping his distance from you. What changed? Blake accelerated his timeline, started targeting Mason's closest associates. 3 died in accidents similar to Kenneth's sudden illness. Lorraine felt sick, so he used me as bait? No, as cover. Mason thought if Blake believed he was distracted by a new relationship, it would buy time to gather evidence. But the marriage wasn't supposed to be real, Lorraine whispered. No, that part wasn't in the plan. Vanessa's expression softened slightly. Neither was Mason falling for you. The revelation hung between them. Lorraine's mind raced, reassessing everything through this new lens. Blake knows about the security protocol Kenneth was developing, she said. He thinks I can get it for him. He's desperate for it. That system would make his current methods of corporate espionage obsolete. Is it worth killing for? It's worth billions. So yes, a plan began forming in Lorraine's mind. What if we give Blake what he wants, but not what he expects? Vanessa's eyes narrowed with interest. I'm listening. By the time they finished talking, Lorraine had made her decision. She wouldn't be a victim or a pawn. Not for Blake, not even for Mason. She would honor Kenneth's memory by finishing what he started, but on her terms. As she drove back home, a black SUV pulled alongside her at a stoplight. The window lowered to reveal Mason, his face haggard from lack of sleep. Get in, he said simply. Please. The light turned green. Decision time. She pulled over instead. Mason parked behind her and approached on foot, stopping a respectful distance away. How did you find me? She asked through her open window. I know you, Lorraine. When you need to think, you go somewhere with history. The fact that he understood this about her, a detail she'd never explicitly shared, caught her off guard. As Mason entered the room, Lorraine's pulse quickened, but it wasn't just desire coursing through her veins. It was certainty. I know how to take Blake down, she said. But first, I need to know if what we have is real, because what comes next will change everything. Well, has someone surprised you with their loyalty? Have you ever found strength in unexpected places? Has someone ever understood you in ways you never explicitly shared? Tell me about it. In the end, justice wasn't served in courtrooms or boardrooms, but in the perfectly timed dance of 2 people who had learned to trust not just each other, but themselves. It's a trap. Mason paced the secure hotel room, they'd moved to after Lorraine explained Blake's visit. "He's using you to get to me." "Yes," she agreed calmly. "And we're going to use that against him." The plan she developed with Vanessa was risky but elegant. Give Blake access to a modified version of the security protocol, one that would appear legitimate but contain a tracker that would activate once he deployed it, revealing his entire network of corporate espionage. "It's too dangerous," Mason insisted. "If Blake suspects anything, he already suspects everything," Lorraine countered. "That's why this will work. He expects betrayal. He won't expect the truth to be the weapon." Mason stopped pacing to look at her. Really look at her. Something had changed in Lorraine since she'd left New York. A steel core that had always existed had now risen to the surface. "When did you become a strategic mastermind?" he asked with reluctant admiration. "I've always been one. Running community organizations with no budget requires more strategy than most corporate takeovers." She smiled faintly. "You just never asked." The statement hung between them, an acknowledgement of his failure to see her as an equal partner from the beginning. "I'm asking now," he said quietly. "About everything." For the next hour, they talked without pretense. About Kenneth, about the marriage that began as convenience and became something neither expected, about betrayal and forgiveness and the fine line between justice and revenge. "I can't lose anyone else to Blake," Mason admitted, vulnerability naked in his voice. "Especially not you." "You won't," she promised. "But we do this together or not at all." The next morning, Lorraine called Blake from a prepaid phone. "I'm in," she told him, "but I have conditions." 3 days later, she walked into Blake Industries' Manhattan headquarters, security badge clipped to her blazer, looking every inch the corporate wife there for a charity meeting. In her purse was a flash drive with the modified security protocol. Blake received her in his office, smug confidence radiating from him. "Mrs. Cole, I knew you'd make the sensible choice. I want to see the evidence first," she said coolly. "After the transfer." He gestured to his computer. "Half now," she countered. "Proof of concept." Grudgingly, Blake opened a folder on his desk, sliding across several photos. "Kenneth meeting with me, 2 months before his diagnosis. Discussing terms." Lorraine's heart clenched at seeing Kenneth's face, but she kept her expression neutral. "This proves nothing except that you met. It proves he was willing to talk outside of Mason's knowledge." Blake leaned forward. "The rest comes after you deliver." She handed over the flash drive. "Everything you asked for." While Blake uploaded the files, Lorraine sent a prearranged text to Mason. "Checkmate in 3 moves." Across town, in Cole Enterprises' cybersecurity center, Mason and Vanessa watched as Blake accessed the modified protocol. The moment it integrated with his system, a cascade of data began flowing back to them. Server locations, operative names, financial transactions. "He's in," Vanessa confirmed. "And so are we," Mason replied, a grim satisfaction in his voice. Back in Blake's office, the older man scrolled through the security protocol files, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. "Excellent work, Mrs. Cole. Kenneth would be proud." "Actually, he would be," Lorraine agreed. "Just not for the reasons you think." Blake's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "The protocol is genuine, but contains a little addition Kenneth was working on before he died. A tracking algorithm that identifies and maps industrial espionage networks." She checked her watch. "Your entire operation was just exposed to federal authorities and international regulatory bodies." Simultaneously, the blood drained from Blake's face. "You're bluffing." "I never bluff," Lorraine said, rising from her chair as Blake's phone began ringing insistently. "That will be your security team. They've just detected an unusual data extraction pattern." "Too late, I'm afraid." "You'll regret this," Blake threatened, reaching for his desk drawer. "I wouldn't," she warned. "The FBI just entered your lobby. Corporate espionage is one thing. Threatening a federal witness would be another entirely." When the agents burst into Blake's office minutes later, they found him attempting to delete files, adding obstruction of justice to his growing list of charges. Lorraine met Mason outside, where media vans were already gathering as news of Blake's arrest spread. "It's over," she said, watching Blake being escorted to a waiting vehicle in handcuffs. Not quite. Mason took her hand. We still have unfinished business, you and I. They returned to the penthouse. The first time Lorraine had been there since she'd left. Everything looked the same, yet felt different. Their coming together felt different this time. Not clouded by pretense or revenge or grief, but clear in its intention. I chose you, he whispered against her skin. Not for what you could do for me, but for who you are. Her answer was in the way she moved against him, no longer holding back. Later, as the city lights glowed outside their window, Mason traced patterns on her bare shoulder. The company board wants to name the new security division after Kenneth. He would have hated that, Lorraine laughed softly. But I think a scholarship fund for cybersecurity students would honor him better. Consider it done. Mason's expression grew serious. With Blake's empire crumbling and justice served, only one question remained unanswered. One that Mason asked as dawn broke over the Manhattan skyline. Our arrangement has fulfilled its purpose. So what happens to us now? When is fighting alongside someone revealed more than words ever could? How do you know when what began as strategy has transformed into love? Share your thoughts on how true partnerships are formed. She came into his life as a means to an end. She remained because she became the beginning of everything that mattered. 6 months after Blake's arrest, the penthouse balcony hosted an intimate gathering. Mason's closest executives, Vanessa, and 2 of Lorraine's friends from Atlanta raised champagne flutes as the sun set over Manhattan. To the Kenneth Davis Cybersecurity Initiative, Mason announced, and its first 20 scholarship recipients. Lorraine smiled, her heart full. The foundation they'd established had already identified promising students from underserved communities, future innovators who would carry Kenneth's legacy forward in ways he would have approved. After the toast, she slipped away to the quiet of the master bedroom. So much had changed since she first walked into this penthouse. The woman who'd come to thank a benefactor, never imagining he'd propose marriage, was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and unexpectedly happier. Mason found her there, closing the door behind him. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," she assured him. "Just taking a moment." He joined her by the window, his arms slipping naturally around her waist. Their reflections looked right together. No longer the awkward arrangement of strangers playing roles, but partners who had chosen each other. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small box from his pocket. Inside wasn't jewelry as she'd expected, but a key. "What's this?" "The deed to a house in Savannah," he explained. "Near where you grew up." Lorraine looked up in surprise. "You bought a house in Georgia?" "We bought a house," he corrected. "I thought we could spend time there when New York gets overwhelming. Keep your connections to home." The thoughtfulness of the gesture moved her deeply. This wasn't the Mason who had calculated every move for maximum strategic advantage. This was the man who had learned to see her needs as important as his own. "Are you sure you can handle Southern living?" she teased, blinking back unexpected tears. "I'm learning to appreciate a slower pace." His eyes crinkled at the corners. Among other Southern treasures, his lips found hers in a kiss that still held the power to make her pulse race. His touch had evolved from calculated to reverent, from performance to worship. This was never in the contract, she breathed as his lips traced patterns on her skin. "This part is just for us," he answered, the last barriers between them finally dissolved. Later, as city lights sparkled below them, Mason propped himself on one elbow to watch her face in the gentle darkness. "Any regrets?" he asked. Lorraine considered the question seriously. "I regret the circumstances that brought us together," she finally said. "But not where we ended up. We could make it official, you know." His voice was casual, but his eyes were intent. A real marriage this time. No contracts, no strategy. Just us. She smiled, touching his face. "Aren't we already real?" "Yes," he agreed. "But I'd like the world to know this isn't temporary. That we chose this. Chose each other." The proposal was nothing like his first. No calculations or benefits listed. Just the simple truth of a man who had found his match in the most unexpected place. In the morning, they would return to the work of building something meaningful from the ashes of Blake's destruction. The Kenneth Davis Initiative would help young minds find their purpose. The Blake investigation would continue revealing corporate corruption that needed cleaning. And they would face it all as they had learned to do, together as equals. Yes, she said simply. And with that single word, their story shifted from one of convenience and revenge to one of choice and possibility. The contract that had brought them together had fulfilled its purpose. The connection that had grown between them would write the next chapter. What would you choose if given the chance to walk away or build something real? When has something that began as temporary become your forever? If this journey from convenient arrangement to consuming love resonated with you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories where strategy meets passion and revenge transforms into redemption. Tell me in the comments what surprised you most about Lorraine and Mason's path to each other. And remember, sometimes the most powerful connections aren't the ones we plan, but the ones that plan for us.